I'm sorry for every single moment that I've consented to a reality that sees white men as somewhat superior. And while I would never have a couple of years ago to think that I would ever contribute to any sort of racism, I have. It does not feel good to look at that and to obviously admit that. And so I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I've contributed to that reality. And my devotion and vow is to obviously do the work energetically to see these parts of me, to honor you, every single being, whether black, white, whatever we're talking about, every single color, every single race, man and woman, every single being, dog, cat, whatever, to do the work to actually be able to completely dissolve these energies within us. So I'm sorry for being part of the problem, and I'm doing the work to actually heal that within myself.
Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Masters of Self University podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Lee.
And I'm your host, Danny Morley. And today we're going to be talking about how Superiority, the program of Superiority, creates a false sense of safety. Okay, so I'm gonna do a little share about a healing that I had, but it's gonna come back to what we're experiencing right now with everything that's happening with ICE in the US. So if at first you're listening to this, like, how does this unearth relate to what's happening in the world right now? Just stick with it and understand the energetics behind what it is that I'm speaking about. And then hopefully as we move through the podcast, you'll kind of be able to draw a couple of conclusions in the way that I did. So I want to start with sharing. Obviously, this podcast, we're going to be talking about this dynamic of superior and inferior. So these are opposite ends of a polarity or a spectrum, but they are the same vibrational frequency. And underneath most superiority is, or underneath all superiority is inferiority, right? So I was moving through a healing recently, and I could feel that there was this I was getting the sense, the energetic sense, like psychically, and I was being kind of shown the image of like a castle in the middle, and then far outside the castle a defensive wall, like a castle wall that was like really far away. I couldn't quite understand at first why I was feeling this and what it was all about. And eventually, as I was working through this layer, and it was all around the reason why I kind of went into this particular wound, was it's like me worrying about saying the wrong thing in front of people, even on podcasts when I'm coaching or doing this or doing that. There's this fear, this insecurity that comes up, which I've healed so many different layers of, but it comes up in a few of these different scenarios in my life. And when I started going into it, this is what I was being shown. So I was like, I couldn't feel the deeper pain, the deeper insecurity and the worry that was in there. I couldn't feel it. No matter how the coach was trying to guide me, it's like I couldn't get down there. But what I could feel was this castle analogy. I'm like, all right, so what is this? And over the next few days after that particular healing, I realized that I had to start dissolving this defensive mechanism that I created. And that was why I was being shown this like castle. It's like, well, I have to wall up, I have to protect, I have to defend myself from what I feel like's coming in. And I felt the need to defend because there's a wounded part on the inside which feels really inferior. And I don't know how to love that part of me yet. So what I do as a defense mechanism is I create superiority. So it's easy for me to feel superior and disconnect from my emotions and disconnect from then empathy, then actually feel the truth of what's happening and what's coming up in my present reality. So what got created at a young age was I have to know what I'm doing. I have to know what's happening. And so even if I don't know what's happening, I have to convince and pretend like I do. So it created this false sense of superiority, which to me at that young age, whenever this program got developed, which I believe I was working like a 5-6-year-old, it created this false sense of safety, that if I live in this false sense of superiority, there is a false sense of safety, which allowed me to feel okay in that moment. So this was like this whole construct of, well, the way for me to protect myself, this was the program that was in there, I need to push everything away, create this castle wall all the way around me to defend myself and pretend to be this superior being. And so as I've been going into these, healing these layers, I realized that a lot of this was coming up and being shown back to me through what's been happening with these all the videos I've been watching on ICE. And as I'm watching these videos, this immediate threat and fear started to, oh my God, like it was like breaking down this illusion that this false sense of reality, which I've created in my mind that, oh, this is the way things are. And if I just don't look at anything that's maybe bad, then I can stay in this kind of like this false reality where nothing's bad. And this false reality was all created around superiority. So in how this translates now into like the world that we're living in, and me as a white male, is as growing up in this world, though obviously there's all this stupid conditioning on racism and brainwashing that somehow the color of your skin being closer to white is somehow superior. And although that isn't how I think I live my life, like I would, like in reality, I would never want to obviously consent to those energies. I don't align with that, of course, but are there still parts of me that have received that conditioning and are hiding in my blind spot? And I might not feel that I'm quote unquote racist by any means, but am I aware of every single energetic program that I run that plays out this dynamic of inferior, superior? And finally, through watching these videos, like scrolling on Instagram and seeing the horrors that people are going through, that people, and this is, I want to make this clear, have been going through these situations for probably the last 10,000 years. But for me, as growing up as a what we call a skin color white, right, it hasn't been on my doorstep. So this false reality that I've learned to push away all of my feelings and live as this white male, I haven't had to deal with these emotions. I haven't had to deal with the fear that's actually in our everyday lives, how unsafe this world is, how unsafe it is to, walk down the street as maybe a person with darker colored skin. I haven't had to deal with that because of my skin color. But now with everything that's coming out with ICE, it's brought all of that up, and I've been able to see, oh, this whole superiority thing, although I don't feel like I consent to that, dynamic of what we call like racism, there is still parts of me which have been conditioned to live out superiority, inferiority as a way to protect myself, as a survival mechanism.
So when you started to feel and see into the superiority and the inferiority, what other programs came up for you that you started to feel in there?
Well, it's the lack of safety, right? So with this particular wound, it's the fear. Something happened when I was a kid where quite clearly I was very afraid. I felt very small and I felt very inferior. I was scared for my own life and I didn't know how to process those emotions. And later on in life, I learned through conditioning, through programming that if a way for me to disconnect from feeling that fear, that level of lack of safety, of inferiority, is for me to become superior, right? So if I can push away all of my feelings and disconnect from all of that and create this false castle wall around me and live in this, I'm this superior being, I don't have to feel the fear that is actually there, the powerlessness is actually there, the smallness, the lack of safety that actually exists in this planet. These are vibrations that, like, they actually exist. I don't have to feel any of that if I live in this false sense of superiority. So it was showing me, yeah, just like when I choose to live in this false reality that I've created, it makes me feel like I'm safe. But actually what I'm feeling, and I'm feeling this all of the time, is how unsafe this world actually is. But I don't want to deal with that. And so my way of dealing with that, instead of alchemizing the fear and finding my power, is to, and it's this program hiding behind, well, let me just be superior. And that was being filtered through the conditioning of being a white male.
So, this is what women feel like constantly since the day they're born. And then also, this is what people of color feel like. And for me, as a woman that is a person of color, I have never felt that safety. I have never been able to go, oh, let me just shut it off and like live in my own bubble, because of what I look like and the gender that I am. So now it's really fascinating because we're in a time right now where, quote unquote, nobody's safe. It's like, I mean, look at Alex Peretti. He's a white male and gets murdered in the face for pulling out his phone to film some domestic terrorists literally terrorizing people and brutalizing them. And then he gets killed for it.
Yep. And I want to express here, obviously, it didn't have to get this bad for myself, anyone else, to start to wake up to like the deeper layers of internal, whether you want to call it racism or misogyny or any of these programs, playing out the lack of equality is what I'm looking for, playing out the inequality. It doesn't have to get this bad in the world. We can simply choose to do exactly what Rachel teaches, which is elevate our consciousness to oneness, see all these programs, alchemize them. We can make that choice, right? And in doing that, it would alleviate the need for humanity to push things this extreme, for us to wake up to the truth of the energies that live on the planet. Because what we're seeing in the world right now with ice, while this is new in like present day, these energies have existed here for a long time, right? Let's just say the last 10,000 years. They have existed here. This patriarchal, tyrannical, inequality ruling has been going on, keeping some beings superior and, us as the human race is inferior, and in all different ways, in all manner of ways, whether they use your sexuality, your gender, your skin color. This has been done to us for a long time. This isn't a new phenomena, but the way that it's being presented right now, and as you said, it's like no one's safe. For a while, and this was like my experience through life, even though I didn't, as a sensitive being, I didn't feel safe, right? Because I still felt this unsafety. I can feel the energies that are in the world. There isn't the vibration of safety that fills the planet, but there isn't that. And yet, as a white male, I don't have to deal with I remember hearing Rachel talk about like the lack of safety she feels when she just goes to a gas pump. And I was just watching a video, I shared it on my social media yesterday, of like people are now lacing pieces of tissue paper and putting it in the handle of where you pick up the gas here in this is in California, I believe. And you touch it and then it drugs the woman. She falls asleep. And then obviously they're watching to come and take you, human trafficking. Like, as a white male, I'm oblivious to a lot of these things. And that's not to shame or judge myself or judge white men at all, right? But we need to stand up and realize that there is so much conditioning that we're unaware of, that we don't realize, because there is a, that term white privilege. There is a certain amount of things that we don't have to feel because of gender, because of race. And that doesn't make it obviously okay in any means. We don't have to let things get to the point where nobody is safe. We can simply choose right now to realize these programs, to wake up to them, to listen to somebody who's more elevated, more enlightened, who's willing to guide you on the process of seeing all the ways that you enact this inequality, and heal yourself. It doesn't have to get this bad, but it did, because this is the collective of what we're currently experiencing. But it doesn't have to be this bad. But I do want to, like, obviously hone in and take the moment to say, like, just the amount of honoring that I realized I've lacked, and the amount of equality that I've lacked growing up in this world, and dismissing those energies, those people, and living in this false white male superiority. It's not an energy, obviously, I want to live in. That's why I'm doing this work, is to be able to see all of this and bring love to it and be able to actually elevate out of it. But the truth is this was the world that I grew up in, and I have been, I had those programs. I probably still do in many levels. And obviously this podcast is about seeing all of that so we can actually heal and elevate out of it.
I do feel like, obviously the tides are shifting rapidly because of everything that we're experiencing just alone in this country, of people really searching for the answers, right? Searching for how do we actually dismantle this? How do we rebuild something new? And as you were speaking, I was just feeling into, I can see and feel that there are more and more people who really do want to heal, who are really waking up to the fact that you can go into the old patriarchal system that does what they do and try to get new leadership in there, or try to make something new in there. I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact that we need to create something brand new. But you can't build something brand new and then have the same people just walk into something brand new just because they want something brand new. And this is what we're really driving home here too, is like Danny's talking about, is if you want new, you have to become new. Like, we can't just have people who think that we need new leadership, or we think, or we're awakened to everything that's happening, and then we're just going to march into a new country, let's say, and go, all right, let's do it. And it's like, no, you have to become it. And I think that's the work that a lot of people still don't actually want to do, because it is easier to go out and protest. It is easier to make social media videos speaking out about things. It is easier to, do a march, right? Than to actually sit with yourself and do the work in order for you to raise your level of consciousness, so that you can actually become a being that has changed, that is shifting, that is creating something new. And the willingness to want to do that, what I see, and you and I have spoken about this, is when somebody decides they want to heal, it's because it's gotten so bad. It's gotten so bad. They're so lost in suffering. They're so in the muck of it that there is no choice but to start looking for the answers to get themselves out of it. And it's like, it's the same thing that we see in our world. Like Danny says, it didn't have to get this bad. And yet it got this bad for us to be like, okay, now we need, where are the light beings? Like, where are the beacons of light? Where are they? Because I need to get myself out of this. And so I feel like it's sad, but it's the way that at our low level of consciousness, it's the only way that we learn. It's got to get so at the bottom of the bottom for us to start to rise up for real, which I'm starting to witness and see a lot of people shifting and looking for true teachers that are going to teach you that. Because we are also living in a time right now where all of the charlatans, the spiritual quote unquote male teachers and gurus, they're all being exposed. You have Deepak Chopra, who has millions and millions of followers, right? People have been listening to him for eons, right? In the Epstein files, right? And all of we're going to see, as we start to rise, we're going to see all the mask wearers. We're going to see all of the fakes. We're all going to see um, the ones that deem themselves as spiritual, fill in the blank. You're going to see them for exactly where they are in their level of consciousness, and it's low. They're not rising, they're not elevating for real. And so we're walking into a time where people are going to be looking for true enlightened teachers to lead them back to their divinity.
Yeah. And it's about, recognizing within ourselves, just like this is where I start with this podcast is, maybe I do wear that mask because for the last while, like since I started this work, in my heart, it's like I would never want to be racist. I would never want that. But I also could feel that there was still stuff in there it's like I had this idea of it in my mind that I didn't want to see any other being as inferior because of their skin color. Like, of course I wouldn't. But energetically, are there any parts of me that actually do wear that mask, that don't fully understand how I actually do that and where it shows up? Because it might show up in that, it might show up in other ways. Everybody is unique on the way that they, these programs and this conditioning gets imprinted. The question is are you aware of it, and do you have the education? And it took me a long while of doing this work to realize, here is how this is playing out. And as you said beautifully, all of the masks, they will come down, and they have to come down. Beings that are obviously elevating to oneness consciousness, you can't wear a mask anymore. They don't exist. And actually, this was one of the reasons that it would get triggered. It would, when I was in Rachel's presence, I could feel that this insecurity would come up. And it's like, this is really interesting that when I'm around her, I can feel this insecurity. But when I'm around other people, I don't feel that way. I'm like, okay, well, why is that? And I realized after obviously doing the work and reflecting on it and contemplating on it, it's because her power can see through the illusion of the mask that I was wearing. So this false construct of superiority that I created, and it was conditioned, and the wounding and all that stuff was there, but let's just say I created this false sense of superiority around her. That mask that I was wearing, even though I wouldn't ever think that I would wear that mask, or wouldn't ever think that I would want to actually be that way, around her, that whole mask it doesn't even exist in her presence, because she is a being of oneness consciousness. So because of her level of power, that mask cannot exist. It doesn't exist in her reality, this false sense of superiority. And what that would do is it would stir up the insecure part of me that felt really inferior and scared. And it was like, that has no choice but to come up in her presence. And then I have the choices. What do I want to do? Do I want to actually go in and heal this and love this and understand what's there? Or do I want to, create more separation and reinforce my programming? Obviously, I'm doing this work. I'm following her and learning from her so that I can become what it is that she's teaching, which is I really do want to see all beings as equal, and not just say that from this like spiritual idea, but actually energetically function that way. And this was the mismatch, and I've been feeling this mismatch for a long time now, of like this just this mask that I was wearing of like, I really want to believe that I am this way, but am I? Do I actually contribute at all to any programs of racism or inequality? And am I willing to actually look at that within myself? And obviously the answer is yeah. Like, I want to see those parts of me, because I don't want to show up that way. And all of the mask wearers, who we'll call them mask wearers, it's funny because California is going through a whole thing with police and ICE about masks right now. But all of the mask wearers that present this false side of themselves, like, that has no choice but to be exposed in the presence of a being who is authentically walking the path of oneness consciousness. Like when you stand in the presence of that level of divinity, those inferior superior dynamics, they do not exist, because remember, duality consciousness is a false brainwash conditioned consciousness. It's a false reality. So when you're in the presence of truth, when you're in the presence of a being that doesn't vibrate at those low conditioned polarizing frequencies, it has no choice but to come up and come out. And so as we all collectively start to walk this path for real, energetically become, those masks will either be exposed or, you know, they have to come up. And this was the process that I've been moving through.
Yep. And the willingness to be able to see, you know, what actually lives within you, you know, that's not a comfortable process to do, and yet it is a crucial process to do if you really want to shift this planet, if you really want to create the opposite of what we're experiencing. I mean, what we're experiencing in this country right now is, there are times I have these moments where I'm like, I'm in disbelief about what's happening right now. It's jarring, and it is, even on top of everything that's happening with the Epstein files and everything that's coming up into the surface. I mean, it is a very, very, very uncomfortable time. And yet the call out is for all of us to see, well, how do we contribute to all of this? You know, because it's so easy to look at ourselves and go, well, I'm a good person, you know, like I'm against ICE, and like I think the Epstein files are gross, and, you know, all of this stuff, and I think Trump is blah, 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, great. And then what's the work that you're doing to heal what you carry within yourself that contribute to collectively what we see out there? And I think that's the part that a lot of people have a hard time putting together, because of obviously all the brainwashing and the mind control and the programming and all of that stuff and the unconsciousness, is that we don't understand truly that we all have a hand in this. We all have a part in this. And until we do the work within ourselves to, like you say, you know, look at the inequality, like for me, all I want is equality for all beings, right? But then I do run programs of inequality. We all do, when we're birthed from the patriarchy, which, like you said, is separation consciousness, which is duality consciousness. When we come from that world, we inevitably will all carry programs of inequality until we see them, we choose to transform them and become the way of equality, right? And so even on a micro level, where do you do that with animals? Where do you do that with the judgment of others? You know, for me, a huge inequality programs are like judging others, judging myself. You know, how many people do you and I coach, and like all the students, the amount of shaming on oneself, the amount of judgment of oneself, right? That's all inequality. And it's like, until we start to heal that and truly become the way of equality, you know, we're never actually going to experience it in our world. And so this is the work. How the nuances of this work and how deep it is that you must be willing to look at yourself and go into yourself and alchemize what needs to be alchemized in order for us to create, you know, to create the golden age of harmony.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be able to do that, you have to have the power to go into, you know, I know we've been speaking about superiority a lot, but it's, am I willing to go into the depths of the pain of how inferior I feel? Like,
which that's not easy to feel. It's really
right.
not.
And this is the finding the power, is the opposite. You know, you've got this superiority that I've created to make myself feel safe, because what I really don't want to feel is the fear and the inferiority. I really don't want to feel what this world actually feels like. I really don't want to feel what that being over there that has been racially profiled, I don't want to feel like empathetically feel what they're going through. And I don't have the power to stand up and rise and say, enough's enough. I don't consent to this reality anymore. I don't consent to the oppression that you're doing. I don't consent to the inequality that you're doing. I don't consent to the racism and the misogyny and all the other programs. I don't consent to that. when I don't have that power, I say contracted small. Or in my case, because I'm a white man, I can go, oh, let me just be in this superior ego. This feels way better than going into that. So the process here is being able to energetically go through and see, all right, here is what the feelings that I'm actually avoiding. Here is this part of me that's afraid, that feels small, that feels inferior because, you know, X, Y, and Z, because their parents told them off when they were a child, or their parents were arguing and it was chaos. And it was really, I could feel the violent nature of what mom and dad were going through. And it really scared the absolute living bejesus out of me. So let me just dissociate from that pain, because I wasn't guided by a divine enlightened teacher in that moment on how to process my emotions of inferiority, of fear. And then I feel so powerless. And so all of this then shame and judgment that I start to develop on myself, because I'm not standing up for all of the beings who have been oppressed for the last how many 100,000 years. I'm not standing up and using my voice in a divinely powerful way. So of course there's going to be a level of, divine shame that starts to come in, for the fact that I haven't been standing up and using my voice in the way that we all should be. Because as Rachel said, like, we should not be tolerating this. We shouldn't. We should see the level of harm that has been. Let's rewind 10 years. We all could have just seen what's been happening on the planet to Black people, or to, you know, Central and South Americans here in the US, and just gone, oh, absolutely not. Let's no way let this happen. Like, clearly, like, fascism and racism is a real big issue here. Let's all do the work to not only not consent to that, to actually heal for real and elevate out of it. But we didn't. And so now we're seeing the ramifications of in the world today. So this journey to actually end the suffering that we see on the planet, to end the inequality, to end the racism, it happens when we individually do the work to see every single program that might be in there, to say, you know what? I don't feel like I am racist in any kind of way, but I am willing to look at myself and see if there is just a tiny sliver of a program that not only makes me superior in some kind of way, but also where I play the other side of the coin. Where do I actually see myself as inferior? Do I put myself down? Because that obviously lacks the way of equality too. And until we get to that place and stop tolerating any of this bullshit, which is all fake and programmed into us to keep us enslaved, we're going to keep seeing things progressively get worse and worse and worse on the planet.
Yeah, and part of that too is, it just reminded me of someone that I was coaching recently, of like, being raised by very racist, misogynistic, homophobic, you know, a parent, right? And there was so much judgment, inevitably, right, of watching this parent be what they are. And yet the work is, oh, I've absorbed these programs of judgment from my parent. Now I carry it, which means I'm also running a program of superiority, right? And if we're not able to see those programs, we're just the same vibrational frequency as the homophobic, racist, you know, misogynistic parent that we have grown to detest and judge and never want to be like, right? And this is why it's so crucial to do the work. And in your first semester at MSU in the Power Within, Rachel teaches a week on how we become our parents. You know, how are we like our parents, and the programs that we've absorbed from them. And so this is how critical it is to do the work on ourselves, to see, you know, what's actually in there, because we don't want to become the people that raised us, right? And yet those programs do live within us. And then the work is, well, let me go in and let me start to alchemize all of that. Let me become a way of oneness, so that that no longer exists, right? And something that, you know, has been really hitting home for me is, you know, obviously Rachel is running for California governor, and it's crucial in everything that, you know, she is about, is, you know, stopping ICE, and, you know, the blue ribbon, and all of these things that are going to help the people. And then the other half of what she's here to do is, help people and teach people how to heal themselves. And one of the big things that really hit me was, I've been working with all of these, you know, different students, obviously, at our school, and like coaching them. And a huge thing is, you can feel the warrior in so many of these beings. And yet there's so much wounding around using their voice, especially women, right? Their voices have been stifled, their voices have been silenced, right? It's been beat out of them, it's been abused out of them. It's, things like, you shouldn't be heard, you should only be seen, and things like that. And it's like, how can any of these warriors become what they are, have a zero tolerance for any of the bullshit that's happening, use their voice, open their voice, speak what needs to be spoken? And they can't, because there's all this wounding. And this is where Rachel coming in as the governor she is going to come in as, it's like, I'm not here to just, create new policies. I'm here to actually help you to elevate your level of consciousness. I'm here to actually teach you how to heal yourself so that you can heal all that's in there that's not allowing you to speak, to be the voice for the voiceless, to literally come out of your vocal cords what needs to be spoken when you see an ICE agent ripping a family apart, when you see an ICE agent brutalizing a being, when you see an ICE agent kicking a dog in the stomach. We have to heal what's in there for us to become what we are, to speak what needs to be spoken, to really become the divine beings that have zero tolerance. But we can only become that when we start to heal what's in there that's blocking us from being that.
Yeah, and to be able to do that, we have to just be willing to start with being willing to look at ourselves, being willing to actually heal and elevate for real. And I would just love to kind of end this podcast on just apologizing, really, just from my heart to everyone out there, whoever listens to this, that I'm sorry for every single moment that I've consented to a reality that sees especially white men as somewhat superior. And while I would never have, a couple of years ago, like to think that I would ever contribute to any sort of racism, energetically, I have. And yeah, it does not feel good to look at that and to obviously admit that. And so obviously I'm sorry that I've contributed to that reality. And my devotion and vow is to obviously do the work energetically to see these parts of me, to honor you, every single being, whether black, white, whatever we're talking about, every single color, every single race, man and woman, every single being, dog, cat, whatever, to do the work to actually be able to completely dissolve these energies within us. So I'm sorry for being part of the problem, and I'm doing the work to actually heal that within myself. And I think if we all, and when I say we, I mean any other white men that are out there, if we all can take that stance, and really sink into that and take the ownership, obviously the way of responsibility is the first way of oneness, right? Of being able to say, listen, I put my hand up, I've contributed to this, and I feel now that I see it and I can actually energetically see how and feel how I've contributed towards it, say, I'm sorry. And I'm doing the work to become something entirely new so that I know I'm never coming from those frequencies ever again.
It's beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. So for everybody out there, if you're listening to this and you're ready, Masters of Self University, our next semester starts May 6th. We are enrolling now. You can sign up for a free student enrollment meeting where you can learn everything about becoming a student and enrolling. So check it out, mastersofselfuniversity.com and RachelFiori.com. She is running for California Governor 2026. Read all about what she will be and do when she is voted in as governor. Check it out. And until next time, we'll see you guys then. Bye.